Lucy's Kitchen, it's Lucy's Kitchen. She's Lucy and she's got a kitchen. Lucy's Kitchen.
And now that we've got your attention, let's cook. Hi there. Welcome to Lucy's Kitchen. I'm Lucy and this is my kitchen. Today we're going to make pumpkin soup. Pumpkin soup is a seasonal dish because pumpkins are in harvest right now. It's wonderful to actually cook a real pumpkin. Now, you don't need to cook a pumpkin. You can use canned pumpkin and it's perfectly okay. But a lot of people think, what do I do with a pumpkin? Now, this is not a carving pumpkin, by the way. This is a special pie pumpkin. And so it's sometimes referred to as a sugar pumpkin. Usually they're very, very small. I mean, this one's like 3.5 pounds and it's mostly flesh, where a carving pumpkin is mostly skin, so that you can it's very hollow, but these are grown to be meaty. And so it's actually super easy to cook. Now, you can hack it in half and throw it in the oven, but I find that the easiest way to do it is just poke holes in it and cook it whole. When we're done with this, we're going to make a delicious soup out of the pulp, and you'll see how easy it is to take a pumpkin out of the oven once it's cooled off and remove the skin, remove the seeds, and then we have our beautiful pumpkin flesh to make into this great soup. We'll do that in a second, but I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the other ingredients. We've got bacon. Now, I took a scissors and I cut a bunch of bacon up, a bunch being 6 ounces, which was 6 slices of thick bacon. And I cut it into about 1/2-inch dice. We're going to render all the fat out of the bacon. Then we're going to reserve the bacon later for garnish. In the meantime, we're going to cook an onion in the fat, which will be absolutely delicious, with a little bit of butter added in for extra flavor. Then we'll season it with thyme, a little bit of allspice, some cinnamon, a little sugar, and of course salt and pepper, and a bay leaf. Once we simmer that and get all of the flavors together, including some broth, we'll be able to add our pumpkin, and once we add our pumpkin, we can puree it and make it into soup. So that's what we're doing. And again, don't have to do a real pumpkin, but for those who are curious, I'm going to teach you how to bake a pumpkin. Now, I recommend that you take a skewer. This is just a metal shish kebab skewer. And if you don't have a skewer, you could use a sharp knife. This is a good sharp knife. You can poke a hole in it, kind of like that. But I like the skewer because you can just kind of stab it, go all the way around, stab it like, I don't know, as many times as you want, really. But you only have to stab it about 5 or 6 times, and that should be enough to let out the steam. I've never known these to explode, but some people have said, don't they explode if you don't poke them with, a needle? Well, we don't want to find out. I don't want to have to clean up exploded pumpkin. Anyway, so then we're just going to put it in a baking pan, which I have lined with parchment. I've got parchment in here just to make it a little bit less messy. And that way the pumpkin won't stick to the pan and we can, use it right away. So we're going to put it in the oven. We're going to let it roast for about 45 minutes until it's nice and soft and really collapsed. I mean, it'll feel like, you can just press right into it. And while it is baking, we're going to deal with all the rest of the ingredients. So I'll see you back here in a couple of minutes. Okay, so while we're waiting for the pumpkin to bake, we're going to chop up our onion. I've got a nice fresh onion. It smells really good. And I'm going to I'm going to do it in the food processor because I want it to be really fine. So just cut that up. Now, you could do it by hand, but it might take a lot of effort. So just peel off the outer layer. I'm sure you know how to do this. And I recommend for this particular job, if you're using your food processor like I am, that you cut the onion into 8 chunks. Throw it in there and let the machine do the work. Okay, we're going to start by pulsing. Now this is good for a medium chop, and then if you want it to be even more, you can turn it on, count to 5, turn it off, take a look, and so this needs to be scraped down. I'm just going to use a knife to do that. You could use a spatula, whatever you have handy. You have to stir it down a couple of times because you've got big chunks and very small chunks. And it depends on whether you want your soup to be chunky or not. I kind of like it to be a little bit more smooth. Okay, that's it. We're done. So now we're going to go over to the stove and cook the bacon and the onions. So why don't you join me at the cooktop and we'll take it from here for this beautiful pumpkin soup. So I've been heating up my pan. This is a nice heavy Dutch oven. And I'm going to take the bacon. And then just use the back of a spatula, smush it down into the pan. We don't want to burn it, but we do want it to be crispy because the bacon is going to be our very special treat that we're going to sprinkle on our soup when we serve it. I like to use these heavy bottom pans because they give an even heat. You can even do this in a cast iron pan, a frying pan, you know. There's nothing that says you absolutely have to do it in a deep pan, but this way you don't have a lot of dishes because I'm going to make the soup in this pan too. Bacon, yum. And wow. Okay, this bacon is done. I'm going to turn it off and just let it keep cooking a little bit in the fat while I remove it. All right. And that's it. We're going to set it aside. And now we're going to cook our onions. So I'm warming the bacon fat up again. And I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of butter. It'll give it a nice mellow flavor. And while that's melting, I'm going to just go ahead and throw my onions in. Oh, well, if there's a heaven, I think this is it. Bacon, grease, and onions, yum. And butter, oh my gosh. So the beauty of this is the onions are deglazing any bacon that's stuck to the bottom. Like, you know, sometimes it gets a little sticky down there, and that's called the fond. So we are deglazing the fond while sauteing the onions. And these onions are almost pureed. I mean, they are super, super soft already. And all they have to do is cook for a couple of minutes like this to give up their sweetness, because that's what we want, is the sweetness, not the sharpness of the onions. This is a very savory dish, but at the same time, it has a little bit of that autumn sweetness. So I love it. Now to the onions, I'm going to add allspice, cinnamon, and a little bit of sugar. My bay leaf. And some thyme, just a little. This is all just subtle seasonings, and there's something that I think really enhances the flavor of this soup. And that's it for now. We're going to come back when our pumpkin is ready to be added. Okay, here comes the fun part. Our pumpkin is fully cooked and cooled. It's still warm, I have to say. I've been way underestimating how long it would take to cool off. My advice would be do this part the day before so that you can really have the pumpkin flesh all ready and in your refrigerator, chopped up, pureed, whatever you're going to do. So here we've got our beautiful little pumpkin, and it is just wonderful. It's very tender, and you can see that it's kind of collapsing. And you just tear this part right off. And the amazing thing is that we literally can tear the skin off just like that, which is fantastic. But we're going to take our time because we want to do this right and slice our pumpkin in half, which it slices in half very nicely. And ta-da! A half a pumpkin and all the seeds inside. So this flesh, fully cooked, unseasoned but delicious. Yummy. And, oh, looks like I got a little on myself. Well, that's typical. Okay, so now, normally when you open up a pumpkin, it's really hard to get the seeds out. But in this case, the seeds are just going to come right out. You can reach in there with your hands if you want, or you can use a nice spoon and gently pull the seeds away from the edge. You get the seeds, you get the strings, and you just basically dump it right there. Now, if you want to, you can wash off the strings in a strainer and save the seeds. The seeds are already cooked. All you have to do is crispen them up, and you've got pumpkin seeds, which is a great thing to have. Okay, our pumpkin is quite soft and very easy to peel, as I mentioned earlier. You just have to pull off the skin. It comes right off. So we're going to just cut it into pieces, into chunks. Oops. And really, because we're making soup, we don't have to be too, careful about this. If you wanted to cut it up and then put butter and brown sugar on it and bake it some more, you could do that too. But we're just going to use the pulp as pulp. So let's get that out of there. All right. So I'm just going to use my spoon, and I'm going to put it right into the food processor. Same one we use for the onions. So you don't even have to wash it. You could just, when you're done with the onions, set it aside, then throw all the pumpkin in there. And it comes off very easily. Be careful because the skin tears off too. Now, what I like about this is that it has a little firmness, but it's not hard. And so it has I'd say a mellow woodsiness to it almost, versus the canned pumpkin, which I think tastes a little raw. But as I said earlier, you can use canned pumpkin, but why would you want to? This is really fun. I mean, imagine if you had your kids sitting here with you. They would love doing this. Oh my gosh. I wish my kids were young again because we'd be doing this right now. Anyway, let's just get it all out, and then we will put it in the food processor and puree it down. Okay, there we go. That's it. So pull it over here. Put my lid on, and we'll start by pulsing again. And then you just kind of let it go until it all flips around and it's all pureed. We're done. So now we're just going to go back over to the stove and get our soup underway. Okay, our 3.5-pound pumpkin gave us 6 cups of pumpkin puree, and you can see it's beautiful and thick. So we're just going to add this to the onions and let them simmer together for a second. They're nicely combined. This pumpkin is so gorgeous. I just love every bit of it. And we still have our bay leaf. Now, the bay leaf is going to flavor the soup, but then before we serve the soup, we'll take the bay leaf out. In order to make this into soup, we want to thin it out. So I'm going to add 2 cups of chicken broth. And turn that up. And stir that until it's nicely mixed together. It'll be smooth by the time we're done. And I'm adding 3/4 of a cup of white wine. And finally, just a tiny bit of salt and about a 1/2 teaspoon of freshly ground pepper. Now I'm going to cover it. I'm going to let it come to a boil, and I'm going to simmer it for 20 minutes. This soup will all meld together and it'll be ready to eat. We just want to make sure all the seasonings are right, and the only reason we even need to cook it is to take away any raw flavor that might be remaining in the pumpkin. Although when I tasted it, I thought the pumpkin was perfect. But sometimes if you use canned pumpkin, you're definitely going to want to do this step. So we're just going to let it simmer and come back and give it a taste, and then we'll give the whole thing a try the way you would serve it if it was a holiday meal at your house. Okay, I'm going to give it a taste and see how the seasonings are doing. So it's simmering very gently. Wow, it's delicious. Oh, now what I love about this is that it's so thick, you don't need to add anything to it to thicken it. Like, you don't have to add any cream or anything. It's perfect the way it is, which is lovely. I am going to add some salt, however, because I did notice it doesn't have enough salt. So I'm going to probably add a 1/2 teaspoon, maybe a little bit more. That's about 1/2 teaspoon. And it's super, super thick. So, at this point, you could thin it out with a little bit of water or leave it just like this. For me, this is how thick I want it. I want it where you almost can stand a spoon up. Remember, your guests are only going to get a cupful of this. They're not going to get some gigantic bowl. But if you want to have this as a main meal, you definitely could have a lot of it. It's so good. So I'm going to let it simmer, and then join me at the counter where we will taste it in its full glory. All right, our soup is done. Oh, it's simmering and still bubbling. It smells fantastic. It still has just an incredible fragrance. It has a little tiny bit of spice. Remember we put in a little allspice and a little cinnamon. So I can kind of get just a tiny whiff of that, not like a pie, because we wouldn't want it to be that strong. We just want a little hint, and that is just so great with the flavor of the pumpkin and the flavor of the onions and the flavor of the bacon. So I'm going to stir it up. Oh, there's my bay leaf. Let me get that. Okay, we'll take that out. And I'll just, don't look. Okay, so beautiful. It's nice and thick. It's just the way I had hoped it would be. And I'm going to just put some into a bowl and show you how to dress it. We want it to go right in the middle. And That is beautiful. Okay, so first thing I would do is I would take some chives. If you happen to have an access to chives, they're really the best thing to use because they're very tangy and they're very pretty. But if you don't have chives, you could always use some green onions or nothing. You could also sprinkle some chopped parsley on top. I like doing it because it gives a little flavor, but mainly because of the color. So I'm just going to snip them right on top. Let them fall where they want to. And that's perfect. Then I'm going to take a little bit of heavy cream. You can use some thinned out sour cream if you want. Again, I'm doing this for decoration, so it just has a nice look to it. I'm going to pour a little bit on top, make a pretty design, and that's that. Next, some of our bacon that we've saved. So we don't want a lot, but we just want enough to give you a little bit of bacon when you are having your spoonful and tasting it, and you get that little bit of bacon chew, and it's just wonderful. And finally, you can use pumpkin seeds. I'm using sunflower seeds. I have these great sunflower seeds. They're wonderful to have around for salads, for all kinds of things, and they're great for soup. So sprinkle a few of those on top. Pumpkin seeds would be great too. And look at that. Isn't that pretty as a picture? And now for my favorite part, tasting it. Mmm. 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 Wow. Wonderful. Incredibly delicious. Really satisfying. Very savory. Salt is perfect. Pepper. Can't detect it, but definitely imparts a little bit of piquancy. The bacon adds a little crunch. The cream, of course, adds some creaminess, a little chive, and the crunch of the sunflower seeds. This dish is one I've served many times for Thanksgiving and all kinds of winter holidays, and I love it. My guests love it. I think you'll love it. It's super easy, even if you don't actually bake the pumpkin yourself, although it is fun to do it. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Lucy's Kitchen. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and come back next time when we share more delicious recipes from my kitchen to yours.